Menu Planning Part 2, Assessing Recipes. Your objectives for this activity are to firstly understand how assessing your recipe fits into the menu planning process, and also be able to assess your own recipes using the child serves of foods which you learnt about in Part 1 of Menu Planning. So to recap on Part 1 of Menu Planning, we looked at essential food groups as stated in the Australian Dietary Guidelines. To remind you, those food groups were the grains, bread and cereals, dairy, meat and meat alternatives, fruit and vegetables, with fat added as an extra food group per the Nourish cookbook. We also looked at what a child serve is for each of these food groups, remembering that a child serve is the amount of food from a food group that the child should eat whilst at daycare. But before we start looking at weekly or fortnightly menu plans in terms of appropriate serves of these food groups across a cycle, we need to look at each individual recipe and assess it against the recommended child serves. So this is a recipe for savoury mince and rice, and it's to serve 50 children. So what we'll do is have a look at each ingredient and see what the serve size is like for each of those ingredients. So let's have a look at the rice. We'll see they've got 6 cups or 360 grams, which when you divide it by 50 actually equates to only 7.2 grams a serve per head. Likewise, if we look at the mince, we've got 4,000 grams or 4 kilos. And again, if you divide that by 50, that gives us a serve size of 80 grams. Now with the vegetables, we've got 1 onion, we've got a green capsicum and 8 sticks of celery, which added up together is 570 grams of vegetables, which when you consider that is to serve 50 children doesn't seem to be a great deal. And it does actually equate to 28.5 grams of vegetables per serve. So now on this slide, let's have a look at what the serve size should be per food group. So for rice, the actual required serve per head should be around 30 grams. So we really need to increase that 360 grams to 1.5 kilos. For the mince, 4 kilograms, which equated to 80 grams per serve, a child serve of meat is actually only 50 grams. So we could decrease that 4 kilograms to 2.5 kilos. As we've already said with the vegetables, 570 grams isn't a lot to serve 50 children, and actually one serve is 75 grams, so we would need to increase that 570 grams up to 3.75 kilograms. So what changes could we make? Well, under the grains, breads and cereals, obviously we could increase the rice, but bear in mind that the children may be having something from this food group for morning or afternoon tea, so it may not be necessary to increase it to the full 30 grams a head. With regards to the meat, we've already said we can reduce that 4 kilos to 2.5, and the money that we save on the meat could be used to add more vegetables to the recipe, or maybe even buying a better quality mince, a leaner mince. In terms of our vegetables, we need to increase it from 570 grams to 3.75 kilos, so we need to increase that almost 7 times. So we could increase the onion and add some garlic, we could add canned tomatoes, we could smuggle more veggies in by using grated carrot, zucchini and mushrooms, and we could also use some herbs and spices. Remember that food variety is the key to maximising antioxidant intake, so the more fruits and vegetables we can get into a recipe, the more antioxidants there are going to be. Another alternative is to make the meal vegetarian. So instead of using the mince, you could substitute the meat with red kidney beans. Add a little spice and rename the dish Mexican beans and rice. So this would be a much cheaper option but still nutritious and filling. But just bear in mind, if there is no red meat in the dish, you would need to ensure that there's a good source of vitamin C to aid the absorption of the iron in the beans, which we would have if we added the canned tomatoes. So you should now understand the importance of assessing recipes as part of the overall menu planning process and be able to assess your own recipes against the recommended serve sizes. The next part of the menu planning activity looks at recipe renovation and ways of reaching essential food group recommended serves. Thank you for your participation.